Okay, so we're back now. Hopefully, we'll stay connected this time. And so I was saying that previously, USDA announced application deadlines of March the 22nd for paper applications and March the 16th for electronic submissions. The matching requirement announced was a 1-to-1 match. It was a 50% match. And last week, USDA announced some major changes that make applying for this grant especially attractive. The amount of funding was more than doubled, so that now the total funding is approximately $76 million, and the match was lowered to 10% on the first $35 million of funding. The application deadlines were extended to May the 4th for paper applications and April 29th for electronic submissions. So this will give folks more time to apply for this round of funding. In the words of Chuck Morris, state specialist with USDA Rural Development, these changes are a game changer. And in a few minutes, we'll hear from Chuck, and he'll provide some PowerPoint slides that will summarize these changes. First, however, we've asked David Hughes to spend a few minutes discussing what costs are eligible and what costs are not eligible for this grant. We've had some questions from producers on this question, and it's critical that your application contain only expenses that are eligible for funding, because when your application is reviewed, it will be tossed out if the application contains expenses that are ineligible. So David, I'm going to share my screen and make you the co-host so you can share yours.
Okay. Okay, can y'all see my PowerPoint?
I can see it. I don't know if everyone else can. Great. So you remain the co-host. Excellent. Okay, David, you're ready to go. That looks good.
Thank you, Hal. So like Hal said, we've had questions about ineligible and eligible costs. And this is a tricky topic. And actually, we find it tricky ourselves. And I think even USDA does at times. So we're going to run through those and hopefully this give you a little bit better idea for those of you who hopefully are planning to move forward, especially with the increased funding and the lowering in match requirements. This is just in general, but it's really good advice for, throughout. First, cost and match must be tied to the project that you are funding with value-added producer grant dollars. And so that's just always keep that in mind. And in fact, you might even want to put that on a sign and put it somewhere where you can look at it. So in the process of filling out your application and going through that grant application template, which we highly recommend that you do, that USDA Rural Development provides, you want to justify, and document. So, throughout that grant application template, what does that mean? That means you will need to either demonstrate either an increased level of production of a currently produced value-added product. So if it's something you're already doing and you're going into a new market, you're going to have to justify and document that. Or it's the production of a new value-added product. Okay, same thing, justify, document, and in fact, you need to justify further because you'll actually need to provide a feasibility study in that case. And so cost and match must be tied to these, okay? And so hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a little better idea of what we're talking about here. So ineligible use of grant and matching funds. So expenses not directly related to the funding, expenses not directly related to the funded product for the processing and marketing of the value-added product. Those are ineligible. And so that's basically what I was trying to say earlier. It must be project oriented and tied to the project that you're funding with the value-added producer grant dollars. And also with the match that you're providing. You can't cover cost of growing a crop, such as seed or harvesting costs, anything with raising a crop or producing livestock, such as your animal health treatments or feeding your animals. You can't cover those costs. Those aren't considered value-added activities. So those are eligible. Expenditures made prior to receiving grant funding. And so as you go through and fill out your template, you will put in a starting time. Now that might be adjusted some. This is based on projections, but still you will put a starting plan point in, say August 1, and you'll run everything off that August 1 date. So if your starting date is August 1, 2021, then for example, spending on advertising, which would be a legal expense otherwise, in July 2021, a month earlier, is ineligible. So if you're going to do that, wait until the grant process starts. And that also goes for the match. If you wanted to match your time in July and you have your starting date in August, you can't do that. So to plan, repair, rehabilitate, acquire, construct a building or facility. So building costs, construction, those are out. To fund architectural engineering design work, you can't do that. That's out. Equipment is by and large out. Purchase, lease, purchase, or install fixed equipment, including process equipment. But the key word there is fixed. So it's something that can be moved, that it might be eligible. But before you put it in, double check with USDA, whoever you're working with USDA Rural Development, at either your regional office or the state office in Tennessee, to make sure that what you were talking about, that a piece of equipment unfixed or something that can be moved, is actually eligible. Okay. Purchase or repairing vehicles and including boats, ineligible. Buying land is ineligible. Also, research and development is ineligible. Preparation of the grant application. If you get a grant writer, you can't say we're going to pay our grant writer out of the money we get from USDA Rural Development. But you can get a grant writer who sets payment only if you get the grant. And frankly, if it was me, that would be the only kind of grant writer I would hire. And there are a number that work that way. But then pay that person from another source. Okay, and that's all you got to do. Just be a little bit clever about it. Paying for a non-business specific feasibility study, a business plan. Like if you had a plan that was a generic one for the entire Tennessee grape and wine industry, you wanted to pay for that, that would be ineligible. It needs to be but a feasibility study for a particular winery would be okay. So it needs to be very much targeted to a particular business. Now, in developing your plan, you can use data or information from a non-business specific study. In fact, you'll probably want, or plan, and you'll probably want to do that, but you can't pay for that. Okay. Purchasing the raw product you're adding value to from yourself or other members of the applying organization, but properly valued inventory purchased from a third party is eligible. Now remember, timing's also important here as well. So pay attention to the timing when you would be getting that additional inventory. Now for matching purposes, inventory from yourself might be okay, but before you move forward with that, double check with the people with Tennessee Rural Development that you're working with. Okay, so that might be an exception for match, but you need to double check that. Paying for services that were previously provided or replacing certain services. What do we mean that for that in that statement? Well, for example, if you're already paying $10,000 to a worker who's processing your product, that cost is ineligible. If you hire a new worker, a new cost tied to the project is what's key here to process your justified increase in production of a value-added product, then that cost is eligible. Or if you wanted to, you had a part-time worker and you wanted to increase the time of that worker and you could justify it. So now you're paying the worker $20,000 that was already working for you and you're paying $10,000 previously, that $10,000 increase would probably be eligible. But once again, if it's a gray area, double check. And just a good source in general on what's eligible, ineligible is this source that I've got listed here from the Cornell Law School. Okay, if you want to investigate a little bit on, for yourself further. What's eligible? Well, eligible use of grant matching funds is providing funds for economic planning and activity or eligible working capital expenses that enable you to produce and market that value-added agricultural product and creating marketing opportunities for that product. Okay, so that's just another way of saying what we've already been saying. Okay, what's some example of eligible use of grant funds and match? Well, pay costs of production of producing the raw commodity into the value-added product, including the below. Labor. You know, I just previously used this example of labor. So labor is eligible if you can tie it to what you're doing. Your packaging and labeling is eligible. If you can justify increase in utilities, you have to do that with your utility bills. You'd have to go in and say, well, this is what we're paying for electricity. This we expect to pay. If we do increase production, then that difference would be a justified costs that you could get reimbursed for. Ingredients is another one. Additional raw commodity inventory from third parties up to 49% of the total amount required for the project. Remember that 50% plus of what you're processing, you have to produce yourself to be eligible. So that's why that 49% is in there. And it has to be valued at a fair market price value at the time the grant would start. So once again, if you were looking at, we had a question about feeder pigs. If you were looking at feeder pigs, it would be the value in your project, once again, started in August, it would be that fair market value of those feeder pigs in August, not in July, okay? And it has to be something you're gonna market, it can't be an asset. So you might be able to, cow calves, you might be able to, if you're going to sell those calves on the market, that was something that possibly could be eligible, but then the mama cows wouldn't be eligible, right? Because they're an asset, okay? They're not something that you're going to sell. Other examples include promotional materials, advertising, including things like developing a web system. A lot of people have done that to market their value-added products on the web. And then financial and accounting systems are also eligible. And there's a couple of resources down below. These, I use those in helping you develop this. Now, if you do access these, and I'd recommend, especially if you can go through our previous training, that you do look at what we presented earlier. But if you do look at these, remember they don't include the new elements of the 2021 Value-Added Producer Grant Program that we're talking about right now. So with that, I'm done, and thank you for your time.
Okay, I'm going to ask Chuck to join us now, and let me make you a co-host, Chuck, so you can find you on here. All right, Chuck, you should be able to share now.
Okay, let's see how it goes.
We could see you, but.
Yeah, give me just a moment. I'm bringing it up. If my slideshow will start, it should pop up on that screen. There we go. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate you coming out, and at Rural Development, we're really excited about all these changes in the program for this year with the additional funds. I'm just going to kind of dive right into some of the changes. So, changes or updates for the FY21 VAPG funding period. Funding availability is, I'm going to touch on funding availability, the matching funds, changes to scoring, and the application deadline. So funding availability, the national competition, this is all competed nationally. The regular VAPG funds this year are 41 million. So it was originally supposed to be 38, and they had about 8 million of rollover funding from last fiscal year for a total of 41 million. In addition to that, we have the COVID-19 relief VAPG funds that I think everyone will be excited about. That's an additional 35 million. So that brings our total funds to 76 million for this year, which is a lot of money. So we're hoping to get a lot of application from everyone. So matching funds, regular VAPG funds have a matching requirement of 1-to-1, or, for every dollar of grants you receive, you provide a matching fund, whether it be cash or eligible in-kind contributions. COVID-19 relief funds are going to be a 1-to-10 match, or $1 of applicant match for every $10 of grant, which I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys, this is unheard of in this program. We've never had anything like this. And my guess is we probably won't in the future. So if you were ever thinking about applying, this is the time to apply. So changes to scoring. The only thing that's really changing in the scoring is number 3 in the toolkit. It's commitments and support. They were amended. So the section that you'll see below there was removed from FY21 only. So nature and quality of commitment. In the years past, we evaluate and score based on whether or not your matching contributions were all in kind, whether they were both in kind and cash, or whether they were all cash. So that section was actually removed and points were adjusted in the other. So there's still 10 points for this section number 3, but those points were actually removed from the score sheet. So it makes it a little more easier for you. So application deadline. Paper applications, as Howard mentioned, are due by May 4th at 4:30 p.m. local time at the office you're submitting. So please just make sure you get it by close of business that day. Grants.gov submissions, they allow you to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on April 29th to get your application submitted. So if you're going to submit it electronically, you got to do it a little earlier. We've always been more of a fan of the paper submissions, and take in mind that we do allow for the paper submissions to actually be emailed in, an application that's scanned and emailed in. And we've mentioned this before in the previous training, but I'd like to mention it again in case we have some people that weren't in the previous one. Please, by all means, get your applications in early, and that way our folks will hopefully have enough time to review them. And if there's any issues, they can be spotted. Hopefully you'll have time to fix them before the application.
She is the one that does all our wholesale. Doreen somehow, when she talked to her, realized that we did business with them. With the old people. She had bought the product. And
Someone please.
I'm hearing someone's audio. If you could, please be sure and mute so we can continue to hear Chuck.
It was muted already.
No, it wasn't.
How do you do it? It must be on there. It's on mute.
Okay, so in some closing notes, new planning and working capital toolkits, they're available on our Rural Development VAPG website at the link that you see there. Just wanted to point out again, the maximum award amounts for planning are $75,000 and for working capital are $250,000. So those have remained the same. The grant period can still be a maximum of 36 months with a one-time 12-month extension considered on a case-by-case basis. There is no rural requirement for this program, like most of our USDA rural development programs. You're not required to demonstrate how the business is impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. So this was something I thought was unique to this. I fully expected there to be something requiring you to actually show how you were impacted, but they're not requiring that. And you also must have a score of 50 points or higher to qualify for funding. So just one more thing I wanted to touch on in the notes. An explanation of the order of funds as they're being awarded. So all applicants are going to get the opportunity to compete for the COVID-19 relief funds. So any applicant who doesn't get awarded for those COVID-19 relief funds and score at least 50 points will be sent a letter by the agency asking them if they would like to compete for the regular VAPG funds. So if they choose to do so, the regular VAPG funds, they will have to update their budget and work plan to account for the required one-to-one match or dollar-for-dollar match that's under the standard program. So here's a list of contacts for the specialists in the area offices around the state, and also myself and Audia Hall and our business program director's contact info is there as well. Guys, if we can assist in any way, if there's anything that comes to mind, any questions you have, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'd be glad to help you in any way we can. So that comes down to it. Has anybody got any questions that I can answer or anything that I can help with?
Can you go back to that, the contact page, to show the different counties?
Yes.
And just so I didn't get it. I was going to take a picture of that person in their email, and I guess we can get all of this information.
It's my understanding Hal's going to email this to everyone, but
Okay.
But yes, there it is.
Thank you.
That's correct. We will send it to everyone.
I have a question
Sure.
regarding that last point that you made about the 10% match, the 35 million in the COVID funds. Does that mean that is that incentive to get these in sooner? Will it be first come, first serve on that?
No. All applications they're competitive. So your application will be scored, and they'll start from the top and fund all the COVID projects they can fund with the money available. And once they run out of money, they'll take all the remaining applications as they're scored, send out letters to everyone, give them the opportunity to update their budget and work plan to account for the change in matching funds, and then they'll compete for the remaining 41 million.
So it'll be based on score.
Yes, it's always based on score. It's a competitive grant.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Are there any other questions?
Chuck, we have a question. It's on the chat. What about increase in inventory that you used to grow?
Can they be more specific? I mean, what are they? I mean, you can use grant funds to purchase inventory as long as you're providing 51% of it yourself, not the grant. In other words, you've got to have the majority of it from your own raw commodity. What is the question specifically? Does that address it, or?
Can you provide, whoever put that in, growing plants increasing in different sizes is what he said.
I'm still not sure what he's trying to say. I mean, if tell him to unmute, just ask the question.
Probably not, but from what it sounds like, but yeah, if you can unmute and ask.
I don't know if they're talking about
it's too vague. I just can't know for sure what they're talking about or what the project is, or even if it's an eligible project.
I'd recommend that you email Chuck or one of the other USDA rural development people that were on that list we just looked at with specifics, more specifics, and then I think they could answer your question.
Yeah, we'd be glad to. Just reach out to the specialist that covers your county, and if they need me, I can be brought into the fold and help if they need me. Another
question that was raised, Chuck, is what about new farmers or new producers? This program is really for folks that already have a raw commodity that they're producing and want to process it and market it. Is that correct? Can you speak to that? That is correct. Yes. Yeah, you can't be talking about getting started in farming. You have to already be farming and in production.
Is there a
So,
list of,
Looks like,
a list of projects that got funded last year and the year before. I can,
Yep.
think I can get that and share that. Or Chuck, you may have it.
I can find it. I mean, I was just going to recommend reach out to the specialist in the area you're in, and they can provide it to you.
There you go. So another question was, okay, for someone that's already farming and they want to apply, how long should they have been farming before they apply?
I think as long as you're in production and you have a raw commodity that's ready to be processed, you should be fine. There's no specific set time.
Have there been any hemp-related projects that have been funded for processing into CBD oil? Just asking.
No, sir. That's something that, as agency-wide, as an agency across the nation, I'm sure there's probably some projects that will be looked at this year for the first time. Unfortunately for Tennessee, they decided to stay under the 2014 Farm Bill, which does not permit us to fund any projects for states that are under that Farm Bill. My understanding is this fall they're going to move to the new Farm Bill, or at least that was the last I had heard. But currently, while they're operating under the 14 Farm Bill, we're not allowed or permitted to fund any projects related to hemp.
And another question, I mean, this may be very simple, but a planning grant versus a working capital grant like that, I just don't understand. I mean, so you're getting a grant money to just plan to do something? Is that how does explain that, I guess, to me a little
Well,
bit.
I mean, for some people, when they start off into a business venture and stuff, they're not sure if they want to invest their funds if they think it's something that can be successful. So the ideal behind the planning grant is to help you develop a feasibility study and a business plan to determine if it's feasible to move forward into working in the business. So, that gives someone who's unsure the opportunity to find out if it's something that's worthwhile. Plus, that planning grant or feasibility study and stuff can be used if they want to apply the following year for an actual working capital grant, so that they can actually try to put it into process.
yeah, if it's a new project, then you need a feasibility study. You get kicked in the working capital, you get kicked into a different category, and you have to provide a feasibility study that you didn't do yourself, as part of the requirements for working capital. So that's what Chuck's talking about.
Another question that's been asked is, are agritourism projects accepted, Chuck?
I mean, that's once again kind of another vague question. I mean, what's it pertain to? What are they doing with agritourism? What's the raw commodity? It's just at that point, it's too vague to answer.
Right. So, you really probably wouldn't want to be featuring the words agritourism in an application, but some agritourism operations may have value added agricultural commodities that they are doing some type of processing with that would be eligible. For instance, say a winery that's growing grapes. That taking that raw commodity and making a value-added product would be eligible, even though there might be agritourism activities on that farm or that operation. Agritourism activities per se aren't really eligible, but converting a raw commodity to a value-added product is an eligible project, correct?
Correct. You got it exactly right. I mean, agritourism can be a component of what you do on the farm, but VAPG funds really can't market the agritourism itself. It can be used to market your raw commodity that you're converting into a value-added product you intend to sell.
So if you were filling out your application, you could say, we're taking corn and doing something with it and selling it as part of our agritourism operation. We could say like, well, we have this many customers come through, and so that justifies our ability to sell this product. And so you could use that information, but you need to be careful with it.
The closest thing I can think of that agritourism might possibly tie in is if you have an on-farm store and you use the funds to market the sale of your value-added product that you intend to sell in the on-farm store. But take in mind, we can't fund the store, but if it's included in the marketing, then we could probably cover that if you're marketing your value-added product. And in doing so, you're bringing the people to your farm. That's about the closest I can imagine that would really fit. I see another question here. Any grants for new startup agriculture ventures like meat processing in the area where there are no other processing facilities? I mean, first of all, we can't really do startup. You've got to be an existing farmer. Plus, in addition, a meat processing facility, unless you're only processing your own meat, 51% of the raw commodity being the cows or hogs or anything else would have to be your own. And you'd have to be producing that value-added product that you're actually selling. So we can't fund anything in relation to an actual startup of an actual meat processing facility or any equipment or anything like that related to it.
Now, the Tennessee Department of Agriculture does have the Agricultural Enterprise Funding Program, and that might help fund something like a meat processing startup. But if you're going to get into application this year, you have to do it by April 1. They just made their announcement yesterday. So we recommend you would contact TDA, and Hal send that out in this material as well, the press release that they sent out yesterday. But that's
David,
the only thing I think of that would fit.
I've got Wendy Sneed is on our call today, and we could just take a moment and let her address that news release that was just posted yesterday about the Ag Enterprise Fund. We want everybody to, stop thinking about value-added producer grant for a minute and let's think about the Ag Enterprise Fund as Wendy talks about this. Wendy, are you available?
I am. Hi, everybody. Just a quick little impromptu. They did announce the new round of funding for the Ag Enterprise Fund this week. We will be accepting those applications. I believe the deadline is going to be April 1st. It will be a quick round. But those are for ag and forestry businesses, expansion projects. The application, I will say, is a fairly easy process. And I think Hal wanted Will Freeman to speak on it, and I've just seen Will chime in. So Will is actually the person with our division who handles the Ag Enterprise Fund, and I kind of work specifically with those interested in meat processing. So I will definitely turn the reins over to Will and let him answer the questions pertaining just to the grant and the application process.
Thank you,
Hey,
Wendy.
everybody. Thanks for that, Wendy. And thanks, Hal, for looping us in on this. Just like Hal said, kind of changing our frame of mind from that value-added producer grant to another opportunity. This is a good segue for it. Instead of thinking of ways to get support for an expansion project for your own farm or just for your own production facility, our Ag Enterprise Fund supports Tennessee businesses that are having projects that will create value for other folks. So this meat processing example is a great example. Wendy mentioned in forestry with sawmills. That's another great example. Really, if you're thinking about starting up a business or expanding a business that will bring in products from other Tennessee producers, add value to it or add market value to it, and then either get that back to folks or put it straight out into the market to get additional money, that's something that's of interest for the Ag Enterprise Fund here at the state level. I think I see a question here about farmers markets being eligible for the Ag Enterprise Fund. Unfortunately, farmers markets aren't as good of a fit. We do have some other smaller opportunities to try to support farmers markets, and I'll try to link that in our chat here to put on y'all's radar. But the best examples are those that are processing projects. As everybody's mentioned here, the April 1st deadline is something that we've just announced. A pretty quick turnaround, but as long as you can throw some information into an application that we'll link to you, have a business plan to share with us about that, and then show us that you can have proof of financing, something like a letter from the bank saying that you're in good standing, you'll be good to go by April 1st. But the key component is there's little items that are important. The location, which county you're in, is that a distressed or economically at-risk county, or is it Nashville? Those things have little pieces of involvement in the scoring, but really a key question to ask for your project is, if I spend some money on an expansion or a startup project, how many other farmers or producers or landowners will this benefit? And if that number is just one and it's really only going to benefit you, you may not have a competitive application. But if that number is dozens, or we've seen some that are hundreds, that becomes more competitive. So I will send some links in this chat here of that press release. I know Hal can send this as well, but just to put it on y'all's radar, the press release we sent out and a page for more information on our Ag Enterprise Fund. I'll be sticking around here as well to answer questions and can put my contact information, but that'll be a big priority for us in the next couple of weeks between now and April 1 to assist folks with this process. And just jumping into these questions real quick before I turn it back over to everybody, adding a restaurant to a winery and vineyard be eligible for the Ag Enterprise Fund. The key question that our committee would have on that is, if you have a winery and a vineyard and you add in that restaurant, what is the impact it would have on other farmers and producers? You know, if you're going to be buying a large amount of produce and local meat and utilizing other wineries and vineyards, then the more that you would be using locally, the more competitive you would be. I will say though, when putting that up against something like a meat processor, a lot of times those meat processing projects have pretty substantial numbers on impact for other livestock producers. So it would really be about the size and local impact of that restaurant instead of just the restaurant at your own location. And then, do we speak to Wendy about specific projects, or is there someone from Knox or Blount County? When it comes to the Ag Enterprise Fund, I'd be happy to answer any and all questions and then get that sent to the folks going. And Wendy says that you're good to reach out to her too, especially for meat processing projects. But like I said, I will throw some information here in this chat box and be around to answer questions as well. And Hal, Mr. Morris, Dr. Hughes, appreciate you guys on letting us come in and share some of that information, since this is kind of a pop-up announcement that we've shared.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it, Will. And so, you know, if you have some more questions you think of, we'll be on here for a few more minutes, and glad to answer any that that folks have. I appreciate all of you, David and Chuck, Wendy, Will, for updating us about these. This is a big change with the Value Added Producer Grant. That, you know, this increased funding is really it's really a big deal. So we want to help folks apply for that. You've got some additional time that you can get your application completed. Again, we'll hang around for a little bit here if there are any more questions. And we will send everyone the links to the information that we've provided today, as well as a link to this recording so that you can go back and look at it. Thank you all for attending.
Hey, Hal, one of our specialists pointed out that there were a couple errors in the contact info on our thing. So I'm going to correct them, and I'll send you a correct copy of my PowerPoint presentation that you can share.
That sounds awesome. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you guys for getting this put together on such short notice.
Well, you're the one that really put a lot together here at the last minute. So thank you all so much. You and David both did an awesome job of putting this together on short notice.
I think everybody did real well, and it was just real fortuitous that the TDA press release came out yesterday. So, and that Will and Wendy were able to get in on it. I think, the more the merrier.